Sit with me, young metalheads, as I tell you a story. Many ages ago, in a distant dimension not unlike our own, there ruled two kings, Arthenon Bloodmoon, the king of metal, and Arthenian Greymoon, the king of silence. For hundreds of years, these nearly immortal kings ruled in peace, completely unaware of each other's presence. The kingdom of metal, full of loud music, parties, and relaxation, and the kingdom of silence, a kingdom entirely devoid of music. Arthenian had placed a ban on music entirely years ago. Anyone who played any kind of instrument or music at all was to be hanged. One day, as Arthenian sat on his diamond-encrusted throne, contemplating the world and how he yearned to conquer all things, a mysterious dark portal opened up and a tiny, decrepit imp-like being appeared. This being was hideous in nature, with gray, scale-like skin that appeared to be slowly peeling from the bone, and dark, blank eyes which seemed to be absent of all color. The being wore mysterious armor, also colorless, with a hazy black mist that appeared to glow around it. Immediately, Arthenian reached for his large greatsword, and his three noble guards stood in front of him, blades drawn, to block this mysterious visitor from getting too close.
Easy, my fair-skinned king. I mean no harm. I am ready here as a messenger for my master.
The creature said with a reptilian goblin-like voice. Bloody saliva dripped from his mouth as sharp-pointed fangs could be seen. Arthenian glanced at the creature with anger in his eyes.
I have no reason to hear words from a foul-smelling beast using dark magic to approach my throne. Begone with you!
Oh, what a dear Arthenian! You do have a reason to hear from me. You see, my master and I know your wish to conquer the lands of this world in a power unimaginable. What you do not know is that for these hundreds of years, another king has ruled on this planet. His name is Arthenon Bloodmoon, and he is the complete antithesis of all that you believe in. In his kingdom, he plays loud music all hours of the day and night, and can care less of you or your laws. The master and I simply wish to aid you in putting an end to this pitiful king, and music that is a burden to our very ears. With our help, we can create you the most powerful and terrible army known to the world, and Arthenon will be forced to bow to your will. You would be the most powerful being in history. People would be forced to grovel at your feet.
Arthenian lowered his sword and pondered, stroking the long gray beard on his face. After a few moments, he motioned to his guards to lower their weapons and responded to the mysterious creature.
I have never seen nor heard of this kingdom as you say, creature, but your words do indeed interest me. For ruling this kingdom has grown bland and boring, and I yearn for more. If you could show me this kingdom of loud music, as you call it, then I will be more willing to work with you and your master, for it is in my nature to conquer all things.
The creature waved its hand around in a mysterious fashion and another window-like portal appeared. Through this window, the very kingdom the creature referred to could be seen. Arthenian could hear loud screeching noises from what appeared to be some kind of instrument, as well as singing. The kingdom appeared to be full of celebration and festivities, with hundreds of people bobbing their heads in tune with the loud music. The music nearly made Arthenian's ears bleed. He watched a moment longer to see this other king appear before the crowd and couldn't believe his eyes. The king himself was the one playing this screeching instrument. He looked like he could be a formidable opponent if he would spend more time training for combat instead of playing this disgusting music all hours of the day. Arthenian had seen enough.
Shut it off, creature. I can stand this incessant noise no longer. Come, let us talk of how we can shut down this noise and conquer this pathetic king.
Many years had passed, and the creature, while never telling who his master was, came through on his promise. Arthenian had the largest and most terrible of armies at his beck and call, full of all manner of hideous creatures. Orcs, goblins, trolls, demons, and even the undead served under this king. His army had defeated and utterly obliterated the King of Metal's army, and had taken over the entirety of the world. Anyone who so much as uttered even as much as a hum was burned alive or tortured until death. Everything Arthenian had ever dreamed of had come true. He had become a god among men. However, what Arthenian did not know was that Arthenon had not died with the rest of his army. He and his very close friend and advisor were hiding in the ruins of his old castle. Due to the sorcery his advisor wielded, they were able to remain undetected by the army of terror. On one stormy night, the king spoke out to his advisor in a deep voice. Are you absolutely sure this will work, Sir Gavin? I grow weary and am not sure how much longer I can hold out. I've begun to lose hope that I can ever restore peace to my once fair kingdom. Death and destruction seem to be all that this conqueror and his allies know.
We may be getting older, my dear king, but magic does not age. It will only take a few more hours until these warriors created by all that is heavy will appear. I created them with the sole purpose of putting an end to this terrible reign of terror, and even the army of this false god will not be able to withstand the might of these masters of metal.
King Arthenon trusted his old friend with his entire life, and so he waited until the hours passed. The storms grew louder and more intense, and the king could sense someone or something standing behind him. He leapt to his feet, blade in one hand and shield in the other, thinking they had finally been spotted and this would be his last stand. To his surprise, the two beings that stood before him did not make any attempt to strike him down. The figures were enormous in stature, standing at about 12 feet tall, and had muscles that nearly burst out of the flesh. They had eyes the color of fire and long silver hair that nearly blinded the king. One of the beings, the king noticed, started to stir a little and opened its mouth to speak. On its face appeared to be some kind of war paint designed with a symbol of a dragon, the Blood Moon family crest. The other being also had war paint, but bore a symbol of unknown origin. It was not fully formed. The being who had opened its mouth spoke with the heroic tone of a true warrior.
Greetings, King Arthenon Blood Moon. I am Taunus Rex, Master of Metal. My brother Merrick Ironhand and myself have been created to rid this kingdom of its evil ruler and his army of monsters. Unfortunately, my brother needs more time to be fully created. But I, dear king, stand ready to face down this fierce ruler and his powerful army on my own while I await my brother. Fear not, for I am well equipped to deal with these monstrosities on my own.
Taunus then waved his hand and summoned a massive weapon nearly the size of the king himself. It was shaped like an electric guitar, only it had no strings and the end extended out into a large blade that appeared as if it could slice through entire mountains. The blade also had the symbol of the dragon at its base, which glowed in a neon red color. The entire weapon appeared to be engulfed in flames.
My dear Gavin, you certainly have outdone yourself. These beings will surely put an end to the devastating reign of my sworn adversary. Very well, being. I now dub thee Sir Taunus Rex, Master of Metal and General of the Royal Guard. Go, my fearsome warrior. Strike fear into the hearts of the foul creatures and put an end to the horrors of this world.
With King Bloodmoon's blessing, Taunus Rex walked a large path and looked down the mountainside at the thousands of creatures below. It took only a moment for King Greymoon and his army to notice this massive being looking down at them from above. When Arthenian saw the being draw its weapon, he could make out the glowing symbol of the dragon in the distance. He gritted his teeth in anger as he realized the error of his ways and shouted at his army as loud as he could.
Go now! Slaughter this intruder in the name of silence! He bears the symbol of that pathetic former ruler Arthenon Blood Moon. Bring me his bones and then hunt down Arthenon and finish the job he was supposed to have finished years ago, where I will have you all burning in flames by sunup!
The creatures in the king's army did not hesitate. With the fear of fire and eternal torture, they stormed up the mountainside as one, almost as a tidal wave of figures. With seemingly insurmountable odds, Taunus grinned and leapt at the army, slamming down in the center with vicious force and knocking them back. The battle had begun. It was time to restore the Kingdom of Metal to all its glory. It was time to bring forth the era of the ultimate Metalverse.
And welcome to Ultimate Metalverse. Metalheads rejoice. This is the podcast for all things metal. I'm your host, Tony Saurus Rex. This is more of a introduction episode, so on future episodes, I will bring in my official co-host from one of my other many podcasts, Everything But the Podcast. His name is Twisted Joker. He'll be joining me on episode number 1 to discuss Ozzy Osbourne's most recent album. We'll be reviewing that album in its entirety, talking about it on the show, maybe talking a bit more about Ozzy Osbourne's career and what we love about his music and things like that, so it should be a fun time. On this episode, I don't really have any reviews because I'm doing this solo, and I need to be better, more prepared, and researched if I'm going to do reviews. But hopefully you really enjoyed that story sequence I included at the beginning of the episode, because that is something I want to put on this podcast in an effort to make it stand out from other possibly metal podcasts out there. I plan to continue that story along each episode of the podcast. So that story, I plan on doing a new chapter each episode. In future chapters, I will possibly bring in more of my friends. Twisted Joker will be one of them. Maybe even my wife, who is the co-host of my other podcast, Popcorn Farts, my other podcast dedicated to crappy movies or indie movies, or I think at some point I may change it to just be any movie in general, and we're just going to review movies that we watch, but mainly really crappy movies are the best way to go to where we can talk about them. Hence, when you eat a lot of popcorn and you fart a lot, you get popcorn farts. It's kind of a play on words, as in the popcorn you take to the movies, and then you fart a lot, and the movies we can fart all over and whatever. That's about the gist of popcorn farts. Be sure to check that out. Episode 1, Ants on a Plane, is available on Spotify and all the digital media. But we're not talking about other shows right now. We're talking about Ultimate Metalverse, your new favorite podcast for metal. So yeah, I just wanted to do this introduction episode to maybe talk a little bit about our plans on what we're going to do with the show. Like I said, the first half or the first sequence of every show will be a new chapter in that story that I included in the beginning. At the beginning of this story, I did all the voices and everything myself, the narration, all the characters and voices. But I would like to add in more friends or more characters and more voices as I begin to do other chapters. I would also like to throw it out there, if anybody listening to this is a audio engineer and would like to possibly hit me up, send an email to ultimatemetalverse@gmail.com, and maybe we could talk about how you can help me figure out how to add special effects, or if you want to do it yourself, add special effects into these story sequences so that it can make the story sequences play out more like a movie instead of me just kind of reading. Now, I should note that the music in the beginning of the podcast was taken from a website called Free Music Archive, but it was taken from a specific artist, and I'm probably going to butcher his name because it's kind of confusing. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. It is spelled capital X Takerux. I'm sorry, but I don't know how to pronounce that name if you listen to this. But I did get his permission to use his instrumentals on the podcast. I messaged him on Facebook. Of course, I found it on Free Music Archive, which I actually probably shouldn't have said because I don't want anybody else using this music. I only want to use it for my show, dang it. But that is the underlying instrumental metal music that is underlying in the background of the story sequence. I think that was real. I thought that would be a really cool idea, since I don't have access to sound effects, to just kind of add in metal music to make the story itself feel more metal. And of course, the story itself is centered, still themed around metal and all things heavy metal. Now, I should note on future episodes, when we do review stuff, I do have one rule, and that, because due to my beliefs, I will not review or talk about anything like blatantly satanic. So any kind of metal on that range, if you're a fan of that kind of metal, I probably won't talk about. I don't know if Twisted Joker will. I may still allow him to talk about those bands, but it's just not my forte when it comes to music. I'm more of a 80s power metal guy, like Iron Maiden, into the 90s, like Iced Earth, bands like that, Judas Priest, Metallica, Megadeth, stuff like that. That's more my style, and I think Twisted Joker is into some of those as well, but I think he's into a lot of the newer bands, like the heavier screaming bands. Not to say I'm not. There are a few white metal, as you would call it, or Christian metal screaming bands that I'm into, like Demon Hunter, one of my favorite bands of all time. So hopefully on a future episode, I could definitely talk about some of those as well. But a lot of the episodes will probably be based on a lot of these classic kind of metal bands that I'm really into. I really want to do an episode about Iced Earth. I originally wanted to review their album Dark Saga on this episode, but I recorded that story sequence and did all of that stuff and edited it and all that stuff, and it took till like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I just was not prepared enough to do anything on Iced Earth for this initial episode 0 episode. It is called episode 0 because it's the introduction to the show, and because I'm doing it by myself. I don't have my co-host in it yet, so that's why this is episode 0. But that is not to say that we don't have anything to talk about, because I do have some cool things I found for this episode. I did find some heavy metal news, which should be really cool to talk about. But first, I did find on a website, which I guess is one of the most famous metal websites, but I found the 13 best heavy metal t-shirts of all time, and I guess they ranked them. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about these t-shirts And if you guys have any of these t-shirts yourselves, hit me up on Instagram at Tonysaurus Rex or Real Tonysaurus Rex. Soon I may do an Ultimate Metalverse Instagram account. I'm not sure, but I do have Ultimate Metalverse Twitter. So just do it on Twitter. Don't even worry about Instagram. Maybe send me pictures of some of these shirts that you have, because it'd be cool to see the listeners of this show that are into metal. So be sure to hit up at Metalverse on Twitter. And if for your audio engineer, I believe I already said, hit up ultimatemetalverse at gmail.com. If you're a listener or a fan and there's suggestions of bands that you would like us to review or albums that you would like us to check out, hit us up at ultimatemetalverse at gmail.com as well. Would love to hear from you. And lastly, if you're a band that would like me to use your music as backgrounds in maybe the future chapters where I play the music in the background, hit me up at ultimatemetalverse at gmail.com as well. And maybe we can talk about how we can dive into that. Maybe we can even talk about giving you an interview and a shout out on the show. Obviously, if I'm using your music, I'm going to give you a shout out on the show and in the description and provide links to your stuff. But I'm no stranger to interviews. I love doing interviews from multiple people. If you've ever listened to my other podcast, Everything But the Podcast, you'll already know this, because my first year of that podcast, I mainly did interviews. So yeah, if there's any metal bands looking out for interviews out there that would love to get your voice heard or talk a little bit more about your music, just send me a message at ultimatemetalverse at gmail.com. I will get back to you as quickly as I can. I work Monday through Friday, so if I don't respond right away, it doesn't mean I'm not interested. It just means I need more time to formulate a response to your email and to maybe check out your stuff. So yeah, that's going to do it for that. Let's go ahead and jump into these 13 t-shirts. Coming in at number 13, we have the metal band Obituary's Cause of Death t-shirt. So they actually have a little bit of information here. I am not familiar with Obituary. I have no idea who they are. But Cause of Death apparently was their second album and the only one to feature guitarist James Murphy from... James Murphy? James Murphy from Death and Testament and many more bands. It was released... Oh my goodness. The album of Cause of Death was released in 1990, featuring artwork by Michael Whelan, who's designed for hard rock and metal bands ranging from Evil to Meatloaf to Sepultura. I don't know who Evil is. I know who Meatloaf is, and I'm pretty sure I've heard of Sepultura. The Cause of Death design was actually supposed to be used for Sepultura's Beneath the Remains, but the band's label Roadrunner Records thought it would be better for the Florida Death Metal Act. Shout out to Kerrang.com. I'm reading this direct from their website. So I should note that that's where this is coming from, so nobody thinks I'm like, I don't know if you can vocally plagiarize something, but that's where I'm reading this from. So Roadrunner thought it would be better for the Florida Death Metal Act. Okay, so they thought it would be better to go with Obituary's Cause of Death. So I guess the design is based off of the Call of Cthulhu, which is inspired by the cosmic entity featured in H.P. Lovecraft's short story The Call of Cthulhu. And closer inspection reveals a mummified human figure in the close watch of the creepy, oversized eye. The artwork is a fittingly brutal representation for one of the most brutal death metal bands of all time. I'm not into death metal, so that's probably why I've never heard them. The only death metal I've ever listened to is actually a Christian death metal band by the name of Mortification. Now, them I actually do enjoy, but like I said, a lot of black metal, death metal, satanic metal, stuff like that, I kind of steer away from. So if you're going to leave suggestions, don't leave suggestions for bands like that. But if you want to leave suggestions for bands that are maybe more obscure, that are like power metal or newer metal, cussing doesn't matter. You can do that, because I'll probably talk about Pantera on a future episode. That's one of the most like verbally explicit bands I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, that stuff is fine. Just I stray away from the more like pure satanic stuff, because I'm not going to listen to it. So I'm not going to pretend to know what I'm talking about by talking about it. Now, like I said, Twisted Joker may still talk about it. I don't know. He probably won't, because I won't. And it's probably going to be episodes where we talk about the stuff together. But coming in at number 12 on the most popular shirts of all time, we've got Motorhead's England shirt. If you don't recognize Snaggletooth right off the bat, chances are you've never left the house. So I guess this is like their main logo. The illustrated character was actually birthed by artist Joe Patagno when Lemmy approached him with the task of designing a logo for Motorhead. Patagno took the idea and ran with it, perusing through the old biker patches and eventually staring down the long end of some real animal skull research. So the image he ended up with was a hybrid beast. It's part dog, part gorilla, and part boar. That's actually interesting. So Snaggle would eventually become the symbol that unites those who wear it. So kind of like a biker gang, I guess you would say. So it's a uniquely feral, awesome biker packs found on jackets and vests and grabbing the attention of terrified passerby. So yeah, that's a pretty cool looking shirt. Coming in at number 11, we have Anthrax's Among the Living shirt. I think Among the Living is probably their most popular album, or at least one of their most popular album. According to Kerrang, no metal fan's wardrobe is complete without repping Among the Living, which was released on March 22nd, 1987. I wasn't even born yet when this album came out. I was actually born September 27, 1987. But I have heard the album because my dad listened to Anthrax a lot when I was growing up, which is what my introduction to metal came to. I more grew up in the 90s, but my dad was in the 80s heavily with metal, so that kind of drew me into metal. Someone called this album the peak of the first wave of thrash metal, dedicated to Cliff Burton of Metallica, who had passed away in a tragic bus accident while on tour with the band in Sweden, which is really sad. The album's art was designed by the illustrator of Master of Puppets album, Don Brodigan. So he designed this album and Master of Puppets. As with Master of Puppets, the concept of the image was developed by a band member. Okay, so it was developed by a band member, and then Don Brodigan illustrated it, I guess. The drummer of Anthrax, Charlie Benante, wanted a design that inferred that evil is all around us, hence the many identical static figures surrounding one glowing individual. There's a little-known fun fact to enlighten others when you're rocking your Among the Living shirt. Caught in a Mosh was inspired by Scott Ian witnessing one of the band's techs being pulled into the pit. So there you go. That's some cool little information about that, which is, I guess it's... I don't know if it's just for the shirt or if it was actually the album cover as well. Number 10, I have no idea who this is. Brujeria Montano Guerreros shirt. This shirt featured the album artwork from Mexican-American metal band Brujeria's 1993 debut record. Montano Guerreros is one to avoid wearing if you're planning to stop by your grandma's place later in the day. It features an image taken from Mexican tabloid Alarma, a photo of a burnt and severed head. A victim of the narco war is held up by someone out of shot. That seems a little disturbing that you would use that. The perfect accompaniment to the album's themes of drug trafficking, satanic... Okay, so there's your answer that I will not review them because they have satanic rituals, sexuality, migration, illegal border crossing, and anti-Americanism. I don't know why you would want to listen to something if you're in America that's anti-America, but I guess to each their own. Moving on, at number 9, we got Slipknot's self-titled album shirt. Let's see, when the Masked Nonette first appeared together on the... Okay, this is just a little bit of backstory about Slipknot debuting in 1999 with their self-titled debut. And fans instantly knew that metal would never be the same. The legendary Dean Carr, as adept at shooting rock bands like Slayer, Iron Maiden, and Slipknot as he is at shooting sharks, was the mastermind behind the image. And while not much is known about the 1998 shoot, YouTube does have some grainy, low-quality footage of the band and the photographer at a carnival. What matters most is that this album and the t-shirt on which its cover is printed have become indispensable staples for any metalhead living in the 21st century. Slipknot's another band I never really listened to. I always noticed that they had like the cool masks and the creepy attire. But around the time they came out, I wasn't really listening to the heavier, like, screaming style of music. I think that's what Slipknot is. I may be wrong. Like I said, I never really listened to them. I was listening to more of the Iron Maidens, the Judas Priest, and stuff like that. That was more of what I was listening to whenever Slipknot debuted. So that's where Twisted Joker is kind of going to be my insight into the more modern bands, which should be cool. Number 8. Now this is awesome because I actually did have this shirt and wore this shirt in high school. It is Iron Maiden's Trooper shirt. Anybody who knows me, either through Everything But the Podcast, actually probably from Everything But the Podcast, because I did my top favorite Iron Maiden albums on there, knows that I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. They were one of the main bands that my dad brought me up listening to that I just became immersed in. I have all their albums on Spotify. I listen to them all the time. My favorite album from Iron Maiden is still Power Slave to this day. But there are some... Actually, I don't think it was originally Power Slave on the top 10 albums. I probably just messed that up. I believe it was actually Sign of the Cross, because I love the Blaze Bayley concept albums that Iron Maiden did. But I basically love every era of Iron Maiden in its own right, so it's kind of hard to pick a favorite Iron Maiden album. But the Trooper was definitely an awesome shirt with Iron Eddie as the trooper on the cover. It's one of my favorite shirts, and it was definitely one that I owned coming out through high school. It actually is originally a giant backdrop mask that the band would hang during shows. Eddie eventually made his way to paper thanks to artist Derek Riggs. Eddie obviously has taken on many different forms from album to album, which is one of the coolest things I think about Iron Maiden, is that they always have Iron Eddie on a cover of their album, but he always changes. It's always a different version of Iron Eddie. So it kind of fits perfectly with Ultimate Metalverse, which if you really know what a Metalverse would be, it would be like a multiverse. Kind of like the story kind of ties into that. Your boy, as in me, Tony Source Rex, I'm huge into comics and stuff like that. So Marvel and other comics that have all these multiverses and different versions of characters and stuff like that, I've always been into. So that was probably one of the things that drew me in with Iron Maiden too, is that each album is like a different version of Iron Eddie on the covers, which has always been awesome. But yeah, so that's cool to see a shirt that I actually owned coming in at number 8. In my personal opinion, I probably would have had it higher up, but that's just because I love Iron Maiden so much, so that's kind of a little bit biased. This actual particular version of Eddie debuted in 1983 with the release of Peace of Mind. It literally debuted just to accompany the song Trooper, because Peace of Mind did not have this as the original album. It was actually Iron Eddie in a straitjacket and a padded room. I remember that. The song Trooper was based on the charge of the Light Brigade at the Battle of Balaclava in 1854, for any history nerds out there. That was Kerrang calling the history nerds out. Remember, I'm quoting from them. Bruce Dickinson can be found waving that Union flag around on stage during most performances, and he's recently amped it up a bit by wearing a red coat uniform for the song. So yeah, that's definitely a good one. This next one, another band I really don't know about. I'm still going to go through these because I'm not talking about the bands themselves. I know nothing about them, but listeners out there may know about them. It's a Norwegian black metal band called Dark Throne. Like I said, I don't really listen to black metal or any of the satanic stuff. Wherever you think of all the stuff that happened around that scene, that's a line in the sand, scorched earth, year zero, bleep you have a slogan, and it belongs on a shirt in gothic lettering of some kind, absolutely no question. The phrase first appeared on the sleeve of Dark Throne's fourth album, 1994's Transylvanian Hunger, and has been co-opted as a rallying cry by many Norwegian bands since then. There are many different versions of this shirt, but our feeling is the bigger and bolder the print of the slogan, the better. So it is, what it says is true Norwegian black metal, I guess, is the slogan they're talking about. Coming in at number 6, we have Cannibal Corpse's Eaten Back to Life shirt. Cannibal Corpse is one I think that I actually wanted to listen to, but it's still, I've never checked them out. I've always felt like they sounded like they were related to zombies or something. I'm probably wrong on that. That could be an older band that I haven't listened to. Another classic album cover printed onto apparel, Eaten Back to Life, is amongst the gnarliest on this list, certainly with the gnarliest artwork, drawn with love by comic book artist Vince Locke, who drew Dead World and A History of Violence. The image on this nauseating shirt depicts a zombie gingerly snapping off his own ribs to get to his intestines. Why? Because he's hungry, so he's trying to eat his own intestines. Okay, that's kind of cool. I'd probably wear that, not gonna lie. I love zombies. All things zombies, your boy is into. On a related note, the album was dedicated to the memory of Alfred Packer, the first American cannibal. Well, that's kind of creepy. For those who don't remember, Packer had come back from a group trip to the Colorado Mountains entirely by himself, confessing to have used some of his colleagues' remains as food to survive the trip back. Unlike the depiction on the shirt, however, he did not eat himself. Metal bands will talk about some weird stuff in some of their songs. At number 5, we've got Metallica album Master of Puppets. Only fitting that that would be on one of the top metal album shirts, of course. Master of Muppets. Sounds like I'm trying to say Master of Muppets and like Nantucket and Puppets all at the same time. Master of Puppets is actually Metallica's third album. The cover is their most iconic, which is, in my opinion, like a graveyard. The final image was drawn by illustrator Don Brodingham, who we heard actually drew one of those interviews earlier, but the original sketch was created by James Hetfield. Brodingham is also best known for his work on Stephen King novel covers. That's interesting, but he worked over the sketch and made it his own. Apparently, if you look closely at the bottom right corner in the grass, you can even see the initials DB, which would be his initials. As many Metallica fans know, Master of Puppets is a reference to drug use, i.e. puppet users being controlled by a master. Papa Het, of course, has been very open about his bad habits, re-entering rehab last year after 17 years of sobriety. Hopefully he can get that under control and get back to himself. Coming in at number 4, we got Pantera's Vulgar Display of Power. I didn't have this shirt, but I definitely loved the album back in the day. I think the final track on the album, talking about the friend, I guess that was like committing suicide or whatever, it was like one of my favorite albums. I can't remember exactly what it's called. Twisted Joker and I do plan on reviewing Pantera in the future because Twisted Joker is a huge fan of Cemetery Gates from the Cowboys from Hell album, so we'd definitely be bringing them well, not bringing them on the show. Of course, I would love to bring them on the show, but of course we know Dimebag Darrell has passed away, and I don't know if Pantera is even together anymore. But Vulgar Display of Power is, according to Kerrang, the gnarliest album Pantera ever released, accompanied by the gnarliest album artwork of all time. It's literally just some dude getting punched in the face, which, I mean, I guess if you go by violence and mosh pits, it kind of fits. Pantera hired photographer Brad Geiss to capture the image of a dude getting punched in the face, in part to reflect the band's goal of playing harder than anyone else out there. While late great drummer Vinnie Paul had erroneously claimed that the band paid the poor cover model for 31 punches at a mere $10 per punch to get the shot just right, the truth is that Geiss actually hired a model who was never punched at all. In fact, the photo was staged and manipulated to look like a brutal attack. Still, the image is one of the most intense and iconic in all of heavy metal and makes for a killer t-shirt that sends a clear message to keep back. It is a pretty cool album. That's cool to find out that the person didn't actually get punched, but they made it look like he got punched. Okay, coming in at number 3, we have Death's logo shirt. I've never heard of Death. I guess Death has one of the most recognizable logos in all of metal. Though founder and sole consistent member Chuck Schuldiner would politely argue otherwise, the band is undeniably responsible for establishing death metal as we know it today. Okay, there's another answer why I've never heard of them. They're death metal. And though Schuldiner would take flack for eventually incorporating traditional and progressive elements into his music, such innovation would inspire various subgenres. Okay, we don't care about that. As with all death-related things, Schuldiner came up with the band's logo design too, which originally included an upside-down T to portray an inverted cross, but was adjusted in 1991 for the release of Human to distance itself from religion. Good thing too for fashion's sake, as it makes this t-shirt design all the more universal. Okay, so it was originally an upside-down cross, and they flipped it upright. Okay, we're skipping over number 2. You can look that one up yourself, because I'm not saying what that one is. It's completely anti-Christian. There's a reason I never listened to Cradle of Filth and never will. I'm sure anybody who knows the band will already know what that shirt is. Number 1, we got Slayer, which is basically just a pentagram. I don't know why Slayer is number 1, but like I said, I'm not into the satanic stuff, so I've never been a fan of Slayer. What does it say? The eagle in the band's logo is similar to the one that was often found in conjunction with the Nazi swastika. See, that's another reason I wouldn't listen to them, man. Like, what the heck? It says that Slayer attests time to time they have no interest in promoting Nazi agenda, but they've always been fascinated by evil-looking designs, I guess. So yeah, that was number 1. I don't know why Cradle of Filth even deserved a spot on this list, but I guess metal has often been defined as a genre that flies in the face of everything. They're most metal, I guess, would be considered anti-religion. So let's get into some metal news. Here's an interesting tidbit that metalheads are apparently the music fans most likely to have sex in cars, according to a study. I don't know how they studied that or how they proved it. We got Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman attending an Iron Maiden show. That's actually kind of cool. What else we got on here? 11 bands who single-handedly launch genres. I may save that for a different episode. According to a recent study, heavy metal is good for your health. I guess maybe all the headbanging and stuff could be like exercise. Well, this is interesting. Apparently, Finland held its first ever heavy metal knitting championship, which was some kind of insane spectacle. Heavy metal knitting championship. That is weird. A university offers a PhD scholarship in heavy metal. Alright, that's all the news, I guess, that I have. Hopefully we'll find more news on future episodes. I think this episode went on for a while, especially if you add in the 9 or so minutes of the introduction. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. hopefully you enjoyed it. I enjoyed spending time with you all, and I can't wait to get Twisted Joker on for the next episodes so that we can talk about Ozzy Osbourne's newest album, and on future episodes where we can dive more in depth on specific albums. I think going through the top 13 shirts was kind of cool, except for the 2 that I refuse to talk about. That's just due to my personal beliefs. I don't judge you for yours, so don't judge me for mine. That's the way I see it. It's all about unity and getting along. We should all be able to get along with each other. And yeah, that's going to be the end of this episode. If there's anything you'd like to suggest, like I said, bands, albums that are not black or like death metal or anything like that. If you have any like white metal, like I said, if it's like Mortification, I'll probably listen to them. I don't have any issues with that. But yeah, hit me up on ultimatemetalverse@gmail.com. Send us a message on Twitter @umetalverse. Also, if you're into YouTube or you want to check out any of my other podcasts, I do have a Patreon. The lowest tier is $3 a month. For that tier, you'll get access to exclusive podcasts that will not be like this one or my other 2 podcasts, Everything But the Podcast or Popcorn Farts. These other podcasts will not be on Spotify, Apple, or anything like that. I plan on doing those specifically for Patreon itself. Those will be available to anybody that comes in at the $3 tier. I only have 3 tiers. The second tier is a $6 tier. That includes special visual episodes, so you get video episodes. Not every episode will have video. I should stress that because sometimes we just can't seem to get the video. But certain episodes will have the video. Most likely Everything But the Podcast. Hopefully a lot of those episodes will have video with Twisted Joker and Leslie from the YouTube channel All Things Paranormal. She's a paranormal investigator, and she's our most recent co-host for that show. We'll do video for that. Hopefully Twisted Joker and I can maybe do video for Ultimate Metalverse. That will be exclusive to Patreon as well. There'll be other exclusive Patreon content on there. I will do, on my main YouTube, I do gameplays, taste tests, unboxings, and all sorts of other things. But I will do some of those exclusive to the Patreon so that only Patreon viewers can view them with the link that I include. On Patreon, you also get the entire back catalog of all of my podcasts in one simple Google Drive file. So be able to go there, click on the folders, and you can download all those and listen to them whenever you want. They will be ad-free. I don't know if any of these episodes will have ads just yet, but at some point through my distributing platform, I may have ads or I may do ads, but the Patreon versions will always be ad-free, and you also get early access to them. Now, this one I'm releasing on the same day over everything, so there won't be early access to this episode, but you will get early access to episode number 1. I'll probably release it to Patreon the same day that we do the episode, and then the episodes will start going up hopefully on Tuesdays. Everything But the Podcast always goes up on Wednesdays. Popcorn Farts on Mondays. Popcorn Farts only has 1 episode so far. I kind of disappeared for a couple weeks, but we plan on recording that this weekend as well. And I also, hopefully, provided I don't run out of time, plan on doing more of the exclusive podcasts for Patreon as well. So yeah, head on over to patreon.com. Oh my goodness, that sounded vulgar. Patreon.com/TonySaurusRex. You'll see all the tiers on there. Like I said, the $3 tier is the podcast. And each tier that you go up includes everything with from the previous tier as well. So anybody who does join the Patreon will get shout-outs on social media. Will probably also get shout-outs on future episodes of podcasts. Also, if you leave a review for any of my podcasts on either Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, which are the only 2 podcasting platforms I'm on that I know allow you to leave reviews. If you leave us a 5-star rating and drop a review, we'll be sure to read your review on future episodes and give you a shout out and thank you personally for that, because that's something that I always love to do. We don't have any reviews for this one yet. We have a few reviews that we've read in the past for Everything But the Podcast, but yeah, so be sure to drop us a 5-star rating on Apple or leave us a review on Apple and Podchaser. If you're listening on Spotify or any of the other sites that you can't leave a review on, that's perfectly fine too. I appreciate your listenership. Hopefully you enjoy the episode. And yeah, I think I've covered everything at the end there. Where you can find me on social media, you got at TonySaurusRex, spelled R-E-K-S, on Twitter, or at umetalverse on Twitter. You can also find me personally on Instagram at RealTonySaurusRex, spelled R-E-X, or on Facebook at RealTonySaurusRex, spelled R-E-X. And also you've got youtube.com/TonySaurusRex, also spelled R-E-X. The only one that's R-E-K-S is Twitter, and I believe my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TonySaurusRex, are R-E-K-S because they were already taken. I'm the real Tony Saurus Rex, but some mother twerp out there stole my name before I could get it. taken care of on those sites. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and you will hear me in the next episode, or I'll catch you on the next episode. But until then, stay rockin', everybody, and see you in episode 1.